Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yetta Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. Welcome back to the Shut Up and Sit podcast. Yetta today here talking to you, and I have a very, very special guest. But before I introduce my amazing guest, I just want to say this is so exciting. This is our third episode. I'm kind of getting addicted to this. So I hope you guys that are listening are finding some value. If you've got any feedback at the end of today's show, we'll tell you how to share that with us and how to ask any questions that might be coming up for you as a listener. But it's such an honor. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And especially because I'm here with Bob Flynn, the great Bob Flynn, AKA Pop, and known even better in our family as Papa. So Bob, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Yetta. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so, I said this when I was on the last show with Mom. It's a little surreal to be, seriously, to be sitting here with you on a podcast to talk about the work that we've created together. It's just a little, I'm in awe of it. It's exciting. We're going to have a lot of fun together today. But I think just honoring that, 8 years ago, did you ever think we'd be sitting here doing this together?
Never.
Yeah.
Never in a million years. But I'm glad we are.
Me too. And so for those of you listening, just a reminder, we're down at the Mindfulness Bar, which is in the Shockoe Bottom in Richmond, Virginia. Really cool studio. You can look us up online if you want to learn more about that. But this is not your typical podcast show. We're not sitting in some recording studio with soundproof walls. People are literally walking by on the street above us. We've got this really cool kind of space. It reminds me a little bit about Soho, New York. When you come in our studio here and you walk down the stairs, and we've got these cool windows that look up to the street. So we're literally hanging out at the Mindfulness Bar. There's no alcohol served. Sorry, Bob. I know that was probably your first question. But we don't serve alcohol. But what we do serve is some really cool experiences with cool people like Bob, content, education, fun. Bob's one of the best storytellers around. We were just talking that really we could do a whole podcast series just on Papa's stories. So be prepared. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at today, you're going to definitely have a few laughs and you'll get to experience some of those stories. But Bob, so, we're sitting here 8 years later with a book, a Shut Up and Sit, whole concept and theory of work that literally was created sitting in the living room with you and Mom. In that moment, and Mom and I talked about that story, that breakdown that I had. And if you guys didn't hear episode 1, I talk about that in a little bit more detail. That breakdown of who am I? What's my purpose? What is this all about? I was 40 years old. I was going through a horrible divorce. my ego, I said, just did this big old belly flop off the high dive, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And this Shut Up and Sit manual, the book, the course, the coaching was all created from that experience where I literally carried my ego in a bucket, is what I tell folks, into the living room with you and Mom. And I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go, but I got to do something, and I got to get my act together. And Mom being a life coach, you being a consultant and coach, which I'm sure you'll share with the audience. The most important thing that you all did, first and foremost, and it is literally the introduction in the whole Shut Up and Sit book in the work I do, is you asked me what was my love-based vision for my life. And so today you're gonna teach and talk about that a little bit. But I'm curious, before we get into love-based vision, tell us a little bit about your life. Who is Bob? What's Bob all about?
Well, I'll leave out the police record and some of the things that probably wouldn't be too appealing to anybody. But I grew up in a little small town in North Carolina, the rockin' metropolis of Paw Creek, North Carolina, which is basically now on the outskirts of Charlotte. Lived there till we were 5 years old, and then moved into Charlotte. So basically I grew up in what's called North Charlotte, North Carolina. And we were a lower middle class family. My dad operated a pool hall and what he called a restaurant, which was basically a beer joint. But neither one of my parents drank. They weren't abusive. The childhood was a fun childhood for the most part. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were close. My brothers, twin brothers, who were born 5 years after me. So there were three of us in this small little cinder block house because we couldn't get any materials. If we had the money, we couldn't get any materials. We lived in a tiny little cinder block house. And right down the street from our home was a park, Cordelia Park. And in that park were two baseball fields and several basketball courts. And actually a gym, a housed gym at the front of it. And so that was my deal. My deal as a child was going to the park and playing basketball and playing baseball and football. And found out I was pretty good at it. I was small, but I was fast and I was tough. And so I would go down there and play ball, and I can still see my mother chasing me out the front door because I would run and go to the park, and she wanted me to stay home. But so that was my childhood, was playing sports and having fun. I was a terrible student. I didn't care anything about school. I would go because I had to and didn't care anything about it. But my dad was the kind of guy that you always knew would make it. He was always talking about, I'm going to get us out of here. I'm going to get our asses out of here, he would say. We're all getting out of here. And he, like I said, he wasn't a drinker. He wasn't abusive. He was a hardworking guy. He was a sincere guy. He loved us. He cared about us. And he was tough. I mean, he held us accountable and that sort of thing. So that's, in a nutshell, the kind of environment I grew up in, which was, again, a good environment. As I got on into middle school and high school, again, athletics was the whole thing. I was the quarterback on the junior high school team and played on the basketball team and played baseball and played the three sports and loved it. Would literally sleep with my football or sleep with my basketball at night. My bat, I'd put it in the bed with me. It's all I thought about. The only books I read were sports books. I wouldn't read my school books and that kind of thing. And so that was my life. On into high school, I ended up going to North Mecklenburg High School, which was a large consolidated school. In those days, audience probably doesn't know what consolidated schools are, but there was 3,500 students in my high school. So
wow.
It was a county school, North Mecklenburg, South Mecklenburg, East Mecklenburg, and West Mecklenburg High School, all consolidated schools. In Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. So they were big schools, so the athletics were highly competitive, the players were good, the rivalry was unbelievable, and that sort of thing. And so I managed to play ball with a couple of guys that were being scouted by colleges and by professional teams too. One in particular, Rick Arrington, who ended up quarterbacking the Philadelphia Eagles. And so, of course, when Rick came over, when we got consolidated and he came over, he was the new quarterback. Bob wasn't the quarterback anymore. Rick was the new quarterback. Rick the Rifle, we called him. So Rick was a great pitcher. The New York Yankees were scouting him at age 16, all the major colleges and so on. Wasn't interested in baseball. He said, I don't care about baseball, I'm a football player, and so on. But he did play baseball on our team. We did win 2 back-to-back state championships, which drew a lot of interest from professional scouts and college scouts and so on and so forth. So right out of high school, I did have an opportunity to go to North Carolina State University on a baseball scholarship, but I turned it down because I figured if I go to college, I got to go to class.
That is kind of a number one requirement.
No, I don't want to go to no class. No, they got beer and girls there, and baseball, I'm interested. Other than that, I ain't all that interested. So anyway, long story short, signed a baseball contract with the then Kansas City Athletics, and went down to West Palm Beach, Florida to play in what's called the Instructional League. They call it the Rookie League now. It's called the Instructional League there. Burn up the league. Didn't find any problem with it. I think my high school team could have beat most of those guys. And then I got into the real world, and those guys were all good. They were all big and fast and good. And again, long story short, I played there for 3 years, got traded to Cleveland Indians and would be sent to North Dakota, another Class A league. By that time, I was approaching 21 years old. I was married. I had a baby on the way. I said, I got to get a job making some money. Baseball's done. So I left baseball. Am I talking too much yet?
No, I love it.
All right. Okay.
I'm just waiting for one of the crazy stories to come out, and you guys, they will. I won't mention the boxing the monkey in high school, or I could bring up. Mom mentioned this. What was the lady's name that you just went nuts over? Jane Russell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jane Russell. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can still think about it. I came into my manhood. I mean, when I saw Jane Russell,
Well, Mom said, be sure I mention her at some point because she said you married her because she looked like and reminded you of Jane.
She's kind of like a mini Jane. Yeah. She looked like a mini Jane.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you're married, you have a baby on the way, and you've got a high school degree, which, by the way, they pretty much gave it to you just to get rid of you, is what you tell us.
If I promise never to come back, and say, if you promise never to come back here again, we'll give you your diploma, which I had to play ball.
Yeah.
You had to have a high school diploma.
So how does somebody get a job that has a high school diploma with a couple years of baseball and really no formal education or skill, and you got all these responsibilities? So what'd you do?
Well, that's a great question. You take what you can get. And what I could get was, I went back to my hometown of Paul Creek, North Carolina. There's a petroleum pipeline terminal there on the Dixie Pipeline, and Phillips Petroleum Company, Phillips 66, had a terminal there. So I went back to the terminal and applied for a job. Well, the only job that they had was working on the third shift at an all-night service station on Statesville Road in Charlotte, one of the roughest parts of town. So here I am. I took the job. It's the only job I could get. I couldn't get another job. So I took the job working on the third shift, literally with a .32 pistol in my hip pocket, by myself, pumping gas all night.
Wow.
Yeah, from 12 midnight till 8 in the morning. And I did that for about 6 months, as I recall, and I kept looking for other work and couldn't find it. And I was actually getting paid, at least a livable wage. And a job came open at the Paul Creek terminal, and I applied for it, and it was on the union scale, and I got it. I got the job, and it was driving a delivery truck, delivering case lots of motor oil and 55-gallon drums of motor oil throughout the city of Charlotte and down into South Carolina, and that sort of thing. It's a good paying job, union scale, and that sort of thing. And I worked hard. One thing about me, I was a hard worker. I had a great work ethic. From my dad, really taught me a great work ethic. So I was never afraid of work. I was never afraid of long hours, and I loved making money.
Yeah.
And so, and doing that job, we all need a break, and we all need a mentor. And the manager of that pipeline terminal, and 800 people work there, so it's a big place, was Bob Fisher. And Bob Fisher took an interest in me. And one day he called me into his office and he said, "What do you want to do here, Flynn? What do you want to do? What are your aspirations?" And I said, "I want to go into sales." He said, "Why do you want to do that?" I said, "They're the guys that are driving the big cars, wearing the suits and making the money." And I ain't, And he said, but I said, I can't apply because I don't have a college degree. And he looked right at me, and I'll never forget it. And he said, "You're smart enough to do what you want to do. I don't have a college degree either." I figured the guy was an MBA. I figured he was maybe PhD level, best manager, leader I ever worked with. Toughest one, most compassionate one, all rolled into one. So what a guy to go to school on.
And so he believed in you.
He believed in me.
He saw in you what you wouldn't necessarily say you could see in you. Is that a fair statement?
It's great. And let me tell you something. One day he looked at me and he said, "I'll tell you something, Flynn, you're smart." And I said, "Mr. Fisher, would you say that again? Because I've been accused of a lot of things, but being smart ain't one of them. All right. So would you say that again? Would you say that to me again?" And I can feel the emotions well up in me right now when I repeat that story, because I felt like I am smart. Because all along I said, I'm just a dumb jock. I'm just a dumb jock. I can play ball, but 5'7", 150 pounds. Where am I going to go with this?
Yeah.
And he said, "You're smart and you can go anywhere you want to go." And he meant it. He was sincere. It wasn't something he was saying to get me to work harder and so on. Mm-hmm. So he made a deal with me. He said, "I'll send you down to Greenville, South Carolina to run a truck stop. You'll be the manager, called Service Town. And if you can bring that truck stop to profitability and keep it profitable for 6 consecutive months, I'll see that you get into the sales field with Phillips Petroleum." Now, he had the connections. He knew the president of the company. He was highly thought of in the organization. So I knew he could pull it off. And besides, Fisher's not going to tell you he can do something and then not do it. So I said, I'm there, you know. So he said, well, we're going to send you to some management training, and then we'll send you down there. And I couldn't believe it. And I was paid $1,000 a month. I could not believe it.
And so $1,000 a month. And what year is this?
This was 1965.
Okay, so 1965. What is $1,000 a month in 1965 in today's money?
I don't know, 50 grand, maybe 25 grand. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, $1,000 a month. I'd kill for that, you know.
Yeah.
And so I went to the management training. I went on down to Greenville. I found out that I had a knack for management. I had a knack for working with people. I was tough, but I was fair, and I began to run the people off that weren't working and that weren't waiting on the customers and weren't providing the level of service that we needed to build a business, and brought on some other people, and began to really learn what I was doing. And again, long story short, we brought it to profitability. It stayed profitable for 6 months. And Fisher said, okay, you did your job, and I'm going to meet my end of the bargain. So from that, I went to basically, before I went out to the formal training, was sent around to to the truck stops and the service stations and to train them, to do the training, to show them what I'd learned and so on and so forth. And since I'd been there and done that, they figured I'd have the credibility and so on. And I enjoyed doing that. I found out I enjoyed, being the trainer and the teacher
yeah.
and all of that. And I liked it. And so I wrote my own programs, and they were, rudimentary programs, but they were the best I could do.
And you did all this with no formal education. This was just you going, hey, I did this worked really well, so now I'm going to start to show people what I'm doing. And I know you had some work with the company, but I mean, you didn't have any formal education. You were just going on what you knew and what worked, and then that started to work for others. Is that how that happened? Yeah,
that's how it happened. And they liked the training, and the company liked the training, and up the road that helped me. And also, I enjoyed writing. And I remember when I was about, 10, 11 years old, Ted Williams, the great hitter, was a real temperamental guy, and he made an error in right field and spit at the crowd and all like that. And so that Williams, he would do stuff like that. He'd throw his bat and fight and do all that. But they wrote him up in the Charlotte paper, and said that he was overrated, and he was so on Bob Quincy, the sports editor of Charlotte News. And I read it, and it made me mad. So I fired off a letter to the Charlotte Observer and told them they were full of crap, and I have modified the language somewhat, and so they put it in the paper. They put my article in the paper, and I saw my name in the paper. And my dad almost passed out. He said, who wrote that for you? I said, no, I wrote it. So I liked writing. So back to my oil company story. So I enjoyed writing and putting stuff together, and no formal training in it, just off the cuff and so on. So I went to the sales and marketing school in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, finished up there. Then was assigned to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and started my career with the oil company. That really started my career at a higher level. I was in sales, sold commercial lubricants and things like that. Did a good job and started moving up the organization. And so I'll just fast cycle things.
Yeah, because you had a really great experience there, but where you went, and I think overnight trucking is a great piece that I want to make sure you don't leave out. I mean, we shouldn't say the name of the company, but it will remain nameless if you want it to now, Bob. But, and you're so humble and you have such great stories, but the experience and the success you've had and what you did, and I just think of that company because you've had some incredible success in that industry. And yeah, absolutely talk about that and talk about what you do today, because I mean, people now knowing what you do, and I say this a lot in my book, and I know you shared the same language with me, nobody would have bet on me back in the day. I mean, I didn't have what I thought I needed in order to be successful. And so we talk a lot at home, and those of you listening, you've heard a few episodes now. This is our conversation in our life and our banter at holiday meals, when we get together. We don't talk about TV shows. We don't talk about, I don't even know what's going on in the world. We talk about leadership development, books, business. And so this idea that you're incredibly successful. However, we do talk a lot about beliefs and behavior and limiting beliefs. And what you named was when Bob Fisher said you're smart, and you said, can you say that again? Even if you weren't raised in an environment that was technically toxic or traumatic or abusive, lots of things in our lifetime create our belief systems. And I think your example is perfect. I mean, you didn't believe you were smart. School wasn't something that was a benefit of value to you that you didn't think. And so going out into the workforce and world, if somebody lined everybody up, they wouldn't have said Bob Flynn would be my pick to be one of the best sales consultants and coaches in the trucking industry in Northern America. That wouldn't have been, I don't think you would have thought that they would have bet on you, much less you probably didn't believe that was even in your future.
I would have been voted the least likely to succeed.
Yeah.
That's the vote I'd have got.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about how you did get to success and what that looks like and means today.
Well, again, back to the oil company quickly. I rose through the ranks of the oil company, and what's so ironic about this, and they wanted me to get more formal education, and so they paid for my college. So I accumulated over 100 college credit hours. I never converted it to a degree, because the day that they told me, okay, you're fine, we're good with you and your education, I dropped my classes that day. So school still was not my thing. But I ended up at the oil company, ironically enough. This is the irony of the whole thing, Yetta. I ended up being the executive director of training and education at the oil company. And the PhDs and the MBAs and the rock doctors would come through the thing, and I'm the guy standing up in front of the room training them.
I love it.
And I can remember watching them walk in the door saying, I ain't even believing this. And I would tell them, I can't get it. I can't pass the entrance exam the schools y'all went to, and I'll be your teacher today.
Yeah, and you're teaching them. And I love how the universe works.
Yeah.
And I heard an acronym, not to throw us away, of course, but I heard an acronym the other day, and I thought you would so appreciate this. And in entrepreneurship, you can get a PhD. Did you know that? And it stands for persistence, hard work, and you can put determination, desire, drive, whatever you want in the D for you. And I thought, isn't that interesting that those of us that are entrepreneurial, that do self-start, self-learn, self-motivate, which is our story. It's our family story. If you haven't heard by now, and you'll hear from the rest of the family, there's a pattern. There's a theme. But it is true. So you did have a PhD in that persistence and hard work and desire and drive and determination that got you in the front of the room, teaching the people who probably from society's perspective would have said should have been teaching you.
Yeah, well, my PhD is piled high and deep, I can pile it high and deep. But I also have a lot of formal training and education in the Trial and Error Institute and School of Hard Knocks. I'm a graduate of both of those schools. So, I was doing that job at the oil company, and anyway, by the luck of the draw or the quirk of the draw or whatever you want to call it, I was contacted one time by a headhunter, and right here in Richmond, Virginia, the overnight transportation company was a 65-year-old trucking company, LTL, less than truckload carrier, very successful, the most successful LTL carrier in business. And Union Pacific Railroad in 1984, I believe, or 86, along in there, paid $1.5 billion cash for overnight. It was at that time, it was the largest cash deal in the history of business. So somehow they got a hold of my name, that I was the guy that wrote training programs and did stuff like that. So I get a call from this headhunter, and I said, look, I've been with Phillips Petroleum 21 years. I'm higher than my mom and daddy ever thought I'd get to be. They were both passed away by then. But I said, so I wouldn't be interested. It's not anything I'd be interested in. And then the guy said, unlimited budget, you start from scratch, you write your own deal, you do your and so on. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more. Long story short, I took the deal. And I came to Richmond. Mm-hmm. And so I started with overnight and started writing the programs. And the whole deal was, from Union Pacific, we had to double the size of that business in 3.5 years or less. It was a $750 million company at the time. We had to double the size of the business in 3.5 years or less with no loss in margin. So we couldn't cut the price, get the business, and build the volume. So, but that wasn't my deal. My deal was writing the leadership training and the sales training, business development
But the
training.
sales is, that's what's going to drive that. If you're going to double the size of a business,
Right.
you taught me you don't save your way into a profit.
That's right. No.
Yeah, no, you got to sell.
That's right. So my job was to teach the folks how to do it, and we had 160 salespeople, a national company, the whole deal, big deal. So we started out with that and writing the programs and bringing the people in. We'd bring in a group of people on Friday. It was a whole week program, and they came from all over the country, and then they'd go back and put the process into play. So I'm in Atlanta one day doing a workshop, and the phone rings, and they said, this is before the days of cell phone. This is actually, computers were just coming into play. It's the CEO, Tom Boswell of Overnight. He says, hey, Bob, I need you to come on back to Richmond. He said, I need to talk to you. And I'm saying, okay. I said, I'll wrap up here and I'll get the first flight out. And he said, I'll send a company plane for you. I'll pick you up. I'll pick you up this afternoon. He said, get Secrets. That was my assistant. Get Secrets to finish up the program. I need to talk to you.
What was going through your head?
I said, if they fire me, they got to pay me because I got a 5-year contract, okay? And I'm only 2 years, a year and a half into it.
I don't think anybody sends the private jet to fire you.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. It could be wrong.
Well, that's the first thing that you think of when I got to see you right now kind of thing. So I say, fire me, you got to pay me, all right?
Yeah.
So, but I think I'm doing good work. Everybody tells me I'm doing good work. But anyway, so I come back. I meet him at Salisbury. We met off-site, Salisbury Country Club. And he said, I'll come right to my point. I want you to run sales for the company. I want you to be senior vice president of sales and marketing. He said, the guy that we have in there is just not getting it done. We're not meeting our numbers. We're too far behind. Board of directors is on me, and so on. And he made me a deal. We shook hands on it, and I said, okay. So that's...
And you met the goal. You took the job.
We did meet the goal.
Yeah.
That's a story within itself because a lot of breaks. One person doesn't do it. If I was good at anything, Yetta, it was rallying the troops. It was getting the troops to march in unison toward a predetermined goal, to a predetermined vision, a love-based vision, so to speak. It's creating that and getting everybody moving towards, either getting everybody moving towards it or get out. If you don't like this, if you don't believe in it, if you don't believe we can do it, I understand. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you can't work here.
Yeah.
You can't work here.
And would you say that's something that was taught to you, or do you think, and this is a whole nother episode about leadership development. Are you born a leader? Do you have the potential, no matter who you are, where you are, to become a leader? But do you think for you, when you look back that, because I don't know that you would say you used necessarily love-based vision and that point in your career, it evolved and has grown, but would you say that you were somebody that was a formal education, or was that just an intrinsic knowing that you just were able to just say, here's where we are, here's where we need to go, let's go?
That's a great question. I can only speculate on the answer. I speculate that it's a combination of both. I speculate that I had the intrinsic ability, I had the capability, the propensity for it to a certain degree, maybe a high degree. But then I put in the work too. I put in the reading. I put in the study. I put in the application of what I was reading and studying and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so this whole industry of personal growth, and, just because I want to make sure we get to spend a lot of time talking about that love-based vision, but, you meet the goal, you turn the company around, you get what obviously Mr. Cochran's asking for, they sell the company, and then what do you do?
Well, I met your mom.
I know. So as you guys hear that, I'm kind of teeing up like, let's talk about mom. I got to make sure I put her in the conversation. She'll be really upset, boy.
Oh, no, I don't do anything about putting mom in the conversation.
Well, you not only met mom, but what I think is important here is, you started a company called PeopleWorks.
Yeah.
And that was a company that you ran for how long, and what was it all about?
Well, it's still in existence 25 years ago. When the overnight deal was over, I got a payout.
And how old were you? Were you 40 when that happened?
I was 42 years old.
Okay. So did you think like, I've arrived, I've got everything I've ever wanted to amass? Meaning, where were you? What was life like? Did you feel like you had made it and everything was good on the inside and outside of who Bob was?
Another great question. I felt like I had met my financial goal. And I was just now sitting with that. And the more I sat with it, the more I realized, man, that's shallow. That's shallow. You might think, well, gosh, the guy's got a little bit of money and he can, I didn't have to work and that sort of thing. But not having to work was never my goal. And so the more that I sat with it and sat alone and really didn't do anything for a while, I got depressed. I could never have believed that I've never been depressed in my life. I didn't know what that felt like. Now, this wasn't a, suicidal depression where I laid in bed and cried all day or whatever, but I just wasn't me. Wasn't me. The drive and energy wasn't there.
Do you think that was because you didn't have a purpose?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think I did not have a purpose.
Or a vision, which they're both intrinsically, as you've taught me, intertwined.
They are. And I think it was because this was all about Bob. This was about Bob.
Yeah.
And this was about what I had done. And you don't do those kind of things without a lot of team effort and all like that. I wasn't arrogant or haughty about it, but I think it was all about me. Mm-hmm. And I really woke up one day and I said, man, I couldn't function. I was just like, man, what's going on? I guess I need to see a doctor or something, and so on.
And so, but were you weren't married at this time?
No.
So the first marriage was done, kids were grown.
Yeah.
And I think there was a second marriage, that one kind of wrapped up. And so, then you meet the most amazing woman, Jane Russell, AKA Mom.
Well, I wouldn't call her Jane Russell. She's a whole lot smarter than Jane Russell. But I met your mom very accidentally. I wasn't looking for a girlfriend. I wasn't looking for a wife, but it was driven by this business of, I've got some assets here, some physical assets, and I could help somebody. I could. I want to do something. And I started thinking, I want a family. I want to be, I do want to be married.
And boy, did you know what you were getting yourself into?
Oh, Lord, you can't. You
can't. Got one already.
Oh, you got one, yeah. And so...
but you had that vision where you started thinking about what's important to me. Where do I want to see the rest of my life going?
Right.
Yeah, and we talk about this sometimes in personal growth, but the first half of our life is spent building up our ego. And then the second half is spent, and I'm not sure I really like this language because I am rewriting this narrative around personal development, but the second half of our life is spent in what they would say is unraveling or dissolving the ego. And I'd actually like to introduce that we're not really unraveling it or getting rid of it. We're just inviting it back into the experience. And so it sounds like to me that's where you were. You had spent a lot of time with some belief systems and some, to use your words, insecurities, that you were going to make it and prove to people and become successful. So this whole outer world that you had built that most people see, which is true for most of us, we meet people and it's like, well, who are you? What do you do? And what are the accolades for your career, or how many kids do you have? Or we wear all these labels and roles, and we tell the world that the outside of who we are is really what matters. And what I know and what you know from doing this work is you realize that only gets you so far. So regardless of what your past is, regardless of if people told you to shut up and sit down literally or figuratively, or if it was abusive or if it was healthy, we're building our first half of our life. There's a lot of work, Carl Jung talks about this. The first half of our life is built, spending time concocting this false sense of self. And then we wake up and we're like, what really matters? So you went through that with me, maybe not even knowing that's what you were going through. And you run into mom who that was happening for mom too. She's a single mom with 4 kids and, divorce recovery. You guys meet each other at church, and she's in her own rediscovery process of, who am I? What's my purpose? What value do I have to add to the world? And both of you, I would say, had a similar vision. And then when you met, you figured out, wow, not only are they similar, they're almost the same.
Yeah. Yeah, we were in lockstep. And, your mother's an amazing woman, as you know. She's a very amazing woman.
I'll tell her you said that.
You tell her. I tell her every day. I tell her every day that. Believe me, I do. And so when I met her, we started talking, and people think it was kind of like this, I swept her off her feet kind of thing, but it wasn't like that at all. We'd never held hands. We'd never kissed. We'd never, we had spent the night together, but we sat up talking all
Bob,
night.
I don't need to
we
know
sat
this.
up. We sat up talking all night. I'm telling you, we did. And so, and then we decided to get married,
I know, I remember that.
So I said, what are we going to do with all this love? We professed our love for one another, and we said, what are we going to do with all this love? And I said, well, I want to get married. And she said, me too. So that's how we did.
Well, and so for those of you listening, when you guys met, and it was pretty whirlwind, but that's what happens when your visions are in alignment.
Seemed to be.
Yeah. And when I say whirlwind, you had been several months, but I remember mom calling and saying she was going to get married. And, for us, you guys, the whole conversation was, we got to run a background check on this guy. He could be living another life in another state with a whole nother what do we know about this guy? And it literally was what my sisters and I were talking about. We were convinced it was too good to be true. Now, thankfully, 25 years later, it's still intact, and it is too good to be true to have you as a part of our family. And how much value and benefit the visions that you and mom had coming together, where two come together. It clicked. Not only did you have all this love for each other, you had this love for our family. Right. There were aspects of our childhood in our family, and so I'm the oldest of 4, and you guys are going to learn more about the family. I have a sister who's almost 10 years younger, Jasmine. We call her Jazz. And I don't know if you know this, Bob, but Jasmine tells this all the time. When before you and mom met, Jasmine never dreamed that education, college, that any other life was available to her. And so again, listeners have heard a little bit about mom's story, but growing up with no money, mom literally being on food stamps, cleaning houses for a living. The summer, mom's version of childcare was she took us kids with her to clean other people's mansions, these big, beautiful homes down off of the river. That was what was fun for us. Was mom couldn't even afford a babysitter. Right. So now the benefit of that is we have really sparkling clean homes. We love to clean. It's a value that we all operate from. So I am grateful that mom did that. But, Jasmine never, when you talk to her about it, because, she's college educated, got a phenomenal career, phenomenal job now. But she never thought that was going to be an option for her, given the house and the life that we grew up in. I was already, as when we met, I was already married and out of the house and had my son. And so that life for her and you coming in, the vision impacted so many people in so many ways. The purpose for you to feel like you had a sense of purpose actually enabled, our entire family is different. I might get upset and get choked up. It's entirely different because you and mom came together with a common vision that, not only did it benefit me, it benefited our whole family. And this work that we're talking about and this personal development space, this vision casting, it's so critically important. And so as you guys came together and we started seeing this as a family and talking about this, and, you and mom introducing different concepts about leadership, about, seeing in me, I could say this, the Bob Fisher story that you said, and I do get choked up about this. I know you and mom looked at me and said, we see in you what you don't even know is possible. And I literally had to sit, you guys, every Sunday I would go to mom and Bob and I would go to the house, which mom now lives in a house that is more beautiful than any house she ever cleaned as a kid, I can tell you, and is living a life where her vision came to life because the two of you came together and said, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, and there's no other option. And so seeing that, and then that's why I picked you guys. I mean, I could have probably picked anybody to go to, but I thought, I've seen you and Mom do it. I've seen you come together, and whatever you brought into the relationship from your own background, your own childhood, your own careers, your own, relationships, your successes and your failures, you guys were able to come together and say, we want to do even more. And that was why I came to you. And the very first thing that I said, and if you remember, I was a hot mess, and I won't cuss in front of you. I did cuss by accident in front of Mom, which I felt a little bad about. That was a real hot effing mess, you guys. And you remember, I mean, I was just sitting there crying, sobbing. And what was the first assignment that you gave me?
What's your vision?
Yeah. I had no clue.
Yeah. Well, you better get one.
Yeah. And that's what you said. And I woke up every day and just did what I lived on autopilot. And I know if you're out there and you're hearing this, you might be living on autopilot too. That was my reality. I got up and did whatever I did and had no idea why I did it. And then all of a sudden I meet with you and Mom, and you're like, well, what's your vision? I had never been given permission to even think that I could dream about a reality different than the one that I was in. So this waking up moment for me to go, a vision? What do you mean a vision, Bob? And so what I loved about your question was, and you took a lot from your professional world and you started bringing that over into the personal development space. And I know there's a lot of workshops out there, and they tell you, you got to craft all these goals and objectives and, put all this stuff down. But your vision was different, because you call yours what type of vision?
Love-based.
Yeah. And why do you call it a love-based vision?
Because if it's not based on love, the work that's going to be required is arduous instead of pleasurable. And that doesn't mean that all the work in a love-based vision is pleasurable, but it's a lot more pleasurable if it's based on love. You love what you're doing. You'll run into some headwinds and you'll get a few tailwinds and so on. But the key is when the love's on anything, it can't help but succeed. When somebody tells me they love something, I love it when I'm doing this, then it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
It has to succeed, because love's the most powerful influence in the universe.
Well, and so I mentioned this in the first episode of the show. When you find this love, and I talked about it from Selflove, and kind of back to the quote we were talking about earlier, and it's one of my favorite quotes that self-love is the greatest middle finger of all times. I just keep coming back to that because it's such a powerful image for me to think of all the things I've done from my ego's perspective to protect me, to keep me from getting hurt by other people, attacking other people. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. Living on autopilot, playing out a lot of old patterns and behaviors I didn't even know that I was playing out. And the thing about love is, and I'm talking about not just, self-love, love from source. You cannot contain love. It is an expansive force that cannot be contained, that wants to go out and radiate into every single molecule of everything and everyone around you. That is a powerful force it gives you unlimited freedom. It liberates you from stuff you couldn't even imagine. And I love that was what you said first, not just, what's your vision? Well, I want to have a fancy car, and I want a nice house. I want to get out of debt, and I want to meet somebody new. I could have gone in that level of vision casting and goal setting, which would have all been about my ego. And you said, no, I want a love-based vision. And I didn't bring it today. I almost did. So I went home and I wrote a vision, but I came back with, I don't even remember how many pages. I'd have to go back and look. It's 4 or 5 pages long. And I said, well, boy, I got a lot of stuff I love, but I'd never really been given permission to think about it in that capacity. What did I love to do? That was an easy question for me. I loved people. I loved teaching. I loved talking. I loved learning. And much like you and like Mom, education was never fun for me. School was horrible. I dropped out at 16. You guys can read more about the story in my book. I mean, nobody would have bet on me, because education and learning but nobody ever said, what do you love? I was in an institution and in lots of situations trying to be or actually do something somebody wanted me to do when I wasn't given the freedom to be who I really was. So this love-based vision to me is so important in the very, very beginning. It's in the introduction of the book. If you don't have a love-based vision and you cannot clearly figure out what you love to do, and because we talk about this a lot at home, my son, you guys just moved to Seattle literally a week ago. It's so crazy. He's almost 24 and he finally decided he was going to leave. And I clung on to him and drug him and, and chased the car down the highway, begged him not to go. But he had to go. But, here's the thing why I bring this up. When he left home for college, it was the same, but, leaving home and really going out there into the world, getting his own apartment, getting a job, he's been raised with this. It doesn't matter. And I never forget when Brian Keith was little, it doesn't matter what you do. He would come running into the house. I mean, at 2 and 3 years old, because, I'm doing this work a little bit. And of course, by the time I had my breakdown, he was starting high school. But even the years leading up to that, hearing you and Mom talk about, love and all of your coaching and advice over the years, Brian Keith would come running through the house. And he would say, Mommy, when I grow up one day, I'm going to be a truck driver. And he'd run around the kitchen. I could embarrass my son and tell you guys he used to be naked with a little bicycle helmet and a hockey stick, but I won't tell that part of the story. So
that is better left unsaid. Yeah.
When he hears this episode, he's like, Mom. But he kept coming in the kitchen and telling me all these things he was going to be. And I said, baby, the only thing you ever have to be is Brian Keith, but you can do whatever you want to do. So as he started growing up in this family, and then I started learning this work in high school, this whole love-based vision, and now that he's off on his own, moving to Seattle, I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. Be in a place of love, be in a place of alignment, because you'll wake up every day and high five the universe because you'll be so excited that you get to do what you love to do. And I know when he hears this, he's going to go, gosh, you sound like Mama. So that's what he calls Mom. So there's Mama and Papa. And whenever he gets stuck, whenever any of us get stuck in the family, you and Mom are the first people that get called. And it is constant. It is continual coaching. I will pass out their phone numbers pretty soon. You will be able to call them at any point and get this wisdom. Actually, I should say, this book, this work wouldn't have been possible without you and Mom. You guys are in every page of the book. We've got the love-based vision in the introduction. We have your 12 absolutes in chapter 1. That's some of Bob's content that he wrote. It's a little, the language is a little bit pivoted more towards just kind of health and well-being versus just leadership. And then of course in chapter 2, carrying further on, we have your 5 crippling habits, which are in there on that piece of it. So you're living and breathing in this book. Further in the book, when we start talking about, the thinking, feeling, behaving process, Mom's emotional guidance scale is in there, which is built off of some of the teachings around the law of attraction. And so all throughout the book, and then of course the things I was learning on my journey, narrative coaching, integrative development come into play. And so for me, working with you and Mom, I literally came back with that vision, that love-based vision. And I said, I've got it. It's plain as day. I promise you guys, I'll bring a copy next time if you need proof. But Bob read it. And I said, I wanted to create a cutting edge guide for personal growth and development to reach people all over the world. Because the work I did with you all, putting all this together, adding my components and my learnings with that, I realized I didn't just figure out who I was and what I wanted to do. I had liberated myself at a level and integrated my ego back into the conversation. Wholeness isn't something you go find out there. What we realized through this work is, and what I realized was, wholeness is already in me. My enoughness, my inherent goodness, the awesome aspects of who I am. What I had just done was, and I know we talk about this, you can say you did it too, we all do it. We started building barriers to protect. Our ego said, we can't let anybody see this part of you. So we're just going to build these barriers and go out in the world, and we're going to create separation. We're going to keep people separate. They can only get so close. And so for me, this process and this work that you and Mom helped me do, I just dynamited and just shattered those walls that were just already, it was protecting what was already there. And so if you're listening today and you want to know about this work a little bit more, the value of a love-based vision, the content and the wisdom of Bob, and my mom and all the great saints and sages, it is very much an integrated process and a manual. But what's really cool is wisdom. We find the wisdom inside of ourselves, inside of who we are, because when we can learn to love ourselves, create a love-based vision from that, We go deeper into self-love. We tap back into the source of who we all are. This isn't about religion. This is a very, very deep, intimate place. And so as we wrap up, Bob, I've got one final question for you because, shut up and sit is my language and narrative. I talk about finding the life-changing magic of silence. And that was a piece that I know you and Mom had been involved in: silence and stillness, mindfulness, meditation. Mom went with me when I went out to see Deepak. And as you all were learning that, and I was learning that, I'm just wondering if you could just share some lasting words with our audience to understand what's the value of shut up and sit for you?
Well, it's got many, many values. And one of the values that really occurs to me predominantly is when you shut up and sit and you get quiet and you get still, you begin to surface that wisdom that's within you that you don't get from the gurus or the sages or anybody else, but it's already there. And when you shut up and sit and you get quiet and you turn down that voice in your head and you listen to the stillness, and you relax, all sorts of things start happening. Some of them aren't that great. Some of them are stuff that needs to come up and say, whoa, where'd that come from? And the other side of that coin is some of it is wisdom. Some of it is, I can do this. This is what I'm called to do. This is what excites me. I can do this. I don't need to read another book. I don't need to take another course. I don't need to talk to another guru. So I could go on and on with the benefits, but for me, that's what really occurred to me when I got quiet, when I got alone, when I shut up and sat. Then it began to come up in me, and I began to say, this is interesting. This is interesting, and I can do something with the good stuff, and I can do away with or manage the bad stuff.
Yeah. And this idea of silence and why I love the language of shut up and sit and the North Carolina, which is called, what is it called? North Kakalaki? Is that how we call it in the East, or how you call it in Charlotte? Whatever the term is, it kind of, whether it's a Southern version, I don't know. Sometimes people say you got a real twang in your accent, yet I'm like, I got nothing compared to Bob. Bob's got the Charlotte accent. But that narrative of shut up and sit for me, really was a form of punishment. So what we're doing with this movement and this personal development guide and this work is really reclaiming that language and helping people to see maybe that was used for punishment, or silence was used as a form of punishment for you. In the United States especially, and we've traveled quite a bit, both of us have as consultants, and even traveling internationally, I do know this from the United States point of view. So I will say that because I was born and raised here. Silence is definitely not a social norm that is used as a powerful, liberating, wonderful thing. For most people, for a lot of people, silence is used as a form of punishment, exclusion, play it safe, turn it down. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And so bringing that name into why I called this guide Shut Up and Sit was because I thought, I know how to do this. My story's in there with Gina, and we've already covered that in another episode. I thought, I know how to shut up and sit down. You know how to shut up and sit. Nobody to teach us how to do the work to get silent if we remember somewhere, somehow, we have been told to be quiet, whether that was good or bad. So you do have the capacity. So for me, I wanted to come up with a term. Not only does it mean something to me because I wanted to reclaim that narrative and go from punishment to permission to go within, but I really wanted to come up with a phrase and a name that didn't have a religious dogma attached to this. Yes, we're talking about mindfulness. There's meditation comes into this, guided imagery, self-hypnosis. There's 1,000 different ways that you could get silent and go within. But what I love about this is silence, that wisdom that we're talking about, the soul, the source, the seat of self. It doesn't speak to us with the inner chatter and the inner narrative. It speaks to us in that silent, still knowing. And when you marry that and then you invite that inner chatter of the ego to come in and you start to integrate and work together, and you have that love-based vision, you're unstoppable. And where we're all going as a family, we felt like it was important to share with the world. We know this works for us. It could work for any of you guys out there listening. And honestly, it is. When people say, well, who's your ideal client? anybody can shut up and sit down and figure this out. Now, we have some cool tools. You can learn more about Bob and my mom and the work if you go to shutupandsit.com. We have a cool assessment. We're very much in this industry as personal growth and behavioral change people, but the assessment is there to help you figure out, well, where do I start? And that's what's great about this work. You start with curiosity. You can take our assessment. It'll tell you, should you get a book? Should you do the workbook, the course, one-on-one coaching, consulting's all available. But the core part of every single one of our experiences with this work is you start with that love-based vision. So Bob, I'm just so glad to be able to sit here and talk to you today about our love-based vision as a family. Yours, my life is eternally changed because of your infinite wisdom and that love-based vision that you introduced to me 8 years ago. And I'm really hopeful that those listening will realize that if they get a love-based vision, they too could have their lives changed for the better. So thank you so much for coming in today and sharing with us. And I know we didn't get to some of the crazy stories. However, there might be another time that Bob comes back and enlightens us with some very humorous stories that we have a lot of fun around our family table listening to and talking about. So until next time, you guys, I will be in touch with our next guest. Our next episode, JJ White, is coming up. Bob knows JJ, and we're going to be talking about the next aspect of this work. We're going to be talking about health. We're going to be talking about our well-being. Why is that? Because this is where a lot of this work starts to show up. And so we use a lot of our health behaviors to manage a lot of our ego and clinging and a lot of emotional stuff that's kind of going on under the surface. So we're going to be talking about that with JJ. He's going to be telling you about his personal experience with health and well-being and why that's a really important piece of this whole shut up and sit journey. And JJ's got a lot of leadership development and personal growth background, and you'll hear about his story. So join us on the next episode with JJ. Make sure you go to the website, shutupandsit.com, check out the assessment, and hey, drop us a line if you're curious. You've got some questions, you've got a topic that you want to make sure we cover, whether it's on the show or you just want to know an answer to it. You can email us, and you can send that email to me personally, and I'm just going to give you my personal email. You can send it to stancelYetta@gmail.com and just say, hey, I've got some feedback on the podcast, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're talking about, or this is an idea that I'd like to hear you cover. We want you guys to be a part of this show. This isn't just a show where you sit up in the ethers and watch me talk to other people. We want interaction. We want to hear from people that are listening to the show. So drop us an email, let us know. And hey, before you go, at the end of every episode, there's a really cool song by Ben Glover. It's called Kindness. And this whole idea of getting silent and still and going within, he does a really cool song. He sings the loving kindness meditation. So make sure you check that out at the end and get a little bit of silence and stillness in your day. So until next time, this has been Yetta and Bob. Take care.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be